Hey guys, my name's Jaku Jonesu and welcome to my channel. If you didn't watch my first video, I'm a person who loves Japan and Japanese history, folklore, anime, otaku culture, all that stuff. So this is the first video in a series about Japanese history that I'm going to be doing every other Wednesday. This video is about Minamoto no Yoshitsune. He is a very famous samurai from the Heian into the Kamakura eras. He was born sometime in 1159 in Kyoto as Ushiwaka Maru, right before the Heiji rebellion. He was the ninth son of Minamoto no Yoshitomo and the younger half-brother of Minamoto no Yoritomo. Yoritomo ended up founding the Kamakura shogunate, but I kind of think he's a bit of an asshole. I'll get into why later. Soon after Yoshitsune was born, Emperor at the time Go Shirakawa decided he didn't want to be emperor anymore. This was actually kind of common in the time period for Japanese emperors to step down and relinquish power to one of their kids or something, but they still retain power in the background, you know, making stuff happen behind the scenes. So he was really just still the emperor. The Taira clan really liked the new emperor that Go Shirakawa put in place, who was his son Nijo. But the Minamoto clan did not like Nijo. So when the Taira clan leader Kiyomori left on a personal pilgrimage, the Minamoto clan decided to attack. They decided to set their plan into motion by kidnapping the puppet emperor Go Shirakawa and his son Nijo. This was a blatant attempt by the Minamoto clan to seize power. This was the Heiji rebellion I was talking about earlier. In the end, the Taira clan ended up completely bodying the Minamoto clan. All of the Minamoto clan leaders were banished. Yoshitsune's father, Yoshitomo, was killed, along with his two eldest brothers. Yoshitsune, known as Ushiwaka Maru at the time, escaped this entire thing with his mother, noblewoman Tokiwa Gozen. But Yoshitsune's half-brother, Yoritomo, who I said I didn't like earlier, was not so lucky. He was banished to the Izu province. When Yoshitsune was 7 to 10 years old, record keeping wasn't that great at the time, so we don't really know exactly. He was placed in the care of monks at the Kurama Temple in the Hiei Mountains. In this cute little storybook I have for people trying to learn Japanese, it was said that Yoshitsune did not want to leave the care of his mother. He was crying, grabbing at her kimono, begging for her to stay. But she said, "Lamau, fuck that," gave him this cute little flute and went on her merry way. Unfortunately, what really happened to Yoshitsune's mother, noblewoman Tokiwa Gozen, was that she was captured by the Taira clan's leader, Taira no Kiyomori, and she was forced to make the decision to become one of his concubines, which is really unfortunate. Her husband had just died fighting the guy, and now she basically has to have sex with him whenever he wants. Eventually, Yoshitsune was like, "F this shit, I'm out." He left the temple with some gold merchant that knew his father or some shit, and he went on his merry way on his journey to becoming one of the most ultimate samurai from the Kamakura era. Say hello to the camera. Okay, she doesn't want to. So it is said Yoshitsune as Ushiwaka Maru at the time. I know these names are going to get confusing after a while, so I'm just going to keep calling him Yoshitsune from here on out. Yoshitsune at the time was going on a pilgrimage of his own through some mountains in nowhere, where he encountered mythical Tengu. So every day, Yoshitsune would get just absolutely bodied by these Tengu, but eventually he was getting better and better, and finally, he was able to defeat those phallic-nosed douchebags at their own game, and thus he was trained into one of the most famous samurai of his age. After his training arc, so to speak, the next thing Yoshitsune would do was to find one of his most loyal and noteworthy retainers. But unfortunately, this had to start with his battle with Saito Musashibo Benkei. Benkei was the brick shithouse of his time. He was 6'2", which is impressive by even today's Tinder standards. Benkei was of the idea that samurai these days ain't shit. So he went around defeating every samurai he could find and taking their weapons. He thought that samurai were becoming too arrogant and not worthy of having their two swords at their side. So when Benkei met Yoshitsune, he had taken 999 swords from samurai. Soda said he took 999 swords from samurai, and he was looking to get 1,000. And that's when our hero descends upon him. In my cute little Japanese language learning book, it said that Yoshitsune came to a bridge that Benkei was guarding like some mountain troll, and he was playing the flute that his mother gave him in the beginning before she left him with those monks to never be seen again. And he was playing this flute. He was a little shorter in stature, so Benkei actually thought he was a fair maiden at first, but then he realized that Yoshitsune was actually a man and a warrior at that. So Benkei saw this as his opportunity to get his 1,000th katana. In the end, Benkei lost a miserable defeat to Yoshitsune. Not once, but twice. Once at that bridge, and another time at some temple in Kyoto when he tried to ambush Yoshitsune. So this shows how much of a battle-hardened badass Yoshitsune is. He's this small guy, or this short king, and he completely wrecked this 6'2" brick shithouse. Benkei wasn't all that salty about these defeats. He actually gave up his cause of getting 1,000 swords from these samurais, and he joined Yoshitsune's cause as one of his retainers and became one of his best friends. That's some like Robin Hood and Little John shit right there. I've actually only ever seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, so I don't know if Robin Hood and Little John fight in any of the other iterations. So, back in the capital of Kyoto in 1179, Taira clan leader Kiyomori decides to take puppet emperor Go Shirakawa and put him under puppet house arrest. After this, he put his own 2-year-old grandson, Antoku, in place of Go Shirakawa to be his own puppet emperor. Go Shirakawa's other son, Prince Mochihito, was really pissed that he wasn't picked to be the next puppet emperor. That would make sense. He's next in line. So he went to Minamoto no Yorimasa, a 74-year-old poet, to try to convince him to fight for his cause. Yorimasa actually agreed to this because one of Taira no Kiyomori's sons stole a horse from Yorimasa's son and named it after him to tease him, and this pissed Yorimasa off to no end. He thought that ignorant Taira douchebag. Yorimasa actually sided with the Taira clan at first during the Heiji rebellion because he thought that what the Minamoto clan was doing was wrong. But after his son being teased by Kiyomori's son, Taira no Kiyomori's son, he was just like, no, fuck this, I'm getting into the fray. So Yorimasa, backed by an army of Minamoto warriors and the Mi-Dera warrior monks, decided to stage the Heiji Rebellion Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. This was in 1180. The new Heiji Rebellion 2, Electric Boogaloo, was actually known as the Genpei War and was like the Sox-Yankees rivalry of the Kamakura period. Unfortunately, Yorimasa and his Minamoto warriors and Mi-Dera monks were surrounded by the Uji River by Taira clan forces and were swiftly defeated. Yorimasa, he was pierced by an arrow. He knew his life was coming to an end. So he took out a fan he had on him and wrote an emo poem about how his life sucked, and then actually committed what is known as the first act of samurai seppuku, the warrior's death where they slit their own stomach and kill themselves. After this, Yoshitsune's older brother Yoritomo came out of exile with a force of 200 Minamoto soldiers to fight back against the Taira clan. Yoritomo swiftly got his ass kicked at the Battle of Ishibashiyama, but managed to survive the scrap. After this, Yoritomo was actually able to pull together a force of 30,000 men, all tired of the Taira clan shit. The Taira clan were actually pretty unfair and unjust as rulers, taking a lot for themselves and leaving nothing for the common people. And the common people loved Yoritomo. They loved his cause, they rallied behind them, and this is where the Genpei War really fucking kicks off. Yoshitsune heard the success stories of his brother Yoritomo and immediately wanted in on this war business. Funny enough, Yoshitsune actually met his older half-brother Yoritomo and his other half-brother Noriyori for the first time during this war, so, you know, war brings the family together. So Yoshitsune, as a Minamoto commander, participated in many key battles during the Genpei War, and eventually became a famous Japanese war hero. He eventually had to kill his brother Minamoto no Yoshinaka at the Battle of Awazu. Minamoto no Yoshinaka was competing with Minamoto no Yoritomo for power and influence over the Minamoto clan. Yoritomo was already the clan leader. This is basically just the filler arc. Yoshitsune, now a general for the Minamoto forces, led 3 very decisive battles to end the Genpei War. So the first of these decisive battles was the Battle of Ichinotani, where Yoshitsune, with his not-asshole brother Noriyori and a force of 3,000 men, took the defensive position of Ichinotani, which is now modern-day Kobe, in March of 1184. She wants to hear the story about Yoshitsune. Okay, now she wants to go down. The battle was famous for the individual fighting done by Yoshitsune and his now close homie Benkei, the guy who tried to take his swords earlier. Apparently they were doing some back-to-back Obi-Wan Anakin style shit, and it was really cool. Not much is actually known about if they were actually doing any badass shit like that, because this was 800 years ago, but that's what a lot of scribes and storytellers tell of the Battle of Ichinotani. The second of these decisive battles took place a year later in the March of 1185, which is the Battle of Yashima in Shikoku. This battle is probably my favorite one because I personally believe this is the biggest juke in all of history. Yashima was an island off the coast of Shikoku, and it was basically a massive Taira fortress. This was a place where the little baby emperor, Antoku, who I talked about earlier, was kept safe, and it was the biggest stronghold. It was their temporary capital. Yoshitsune thought that this would be the perfect place to stage a naval attack, and this would have happened if a giant storm didn't come and ruin majority of Yoshitsune's 200 boats. But Yoshitsune was not discouraged by this. Instead of taking a fleet of 200 boats that needed to be repaired, Yoshitsune took a fleet of 5 boats and about 150 men. The Taira forces at Yashima expected him to come, and expected him to come with a massive naval fleet. Yoshitsune came in the middle of the night on his own and went to the other side of Yashima Island and lit a massive bonfire. This was basically to trick the Taira forces into thinking that Yoshitsune was actually staging a land invasion on Yashima. In classic Looney Tunes fashion, the Taira clan completely fell for it. They sent almost their entire forces out to intercept these bonfires lit on a beach on the other side of the island, when there was no one there. So Yoshitsune actually casually strolled up with little to no resistance with his 5 boats and immediately took the fortress on Yashima, bringing the close to the second decisive battle in winning the Genpei War. The third and final of Yoshitsune's decisive battles in the Genpei War was the Battle of Dan no Ura. This battle took place a month after the previous Battle of Yashima in the month of April of 1185. This battle took place completely on the water at the Shimonoseki Strait off the coast of Honshu. The Taira were actually the favorite to win for this battle because they had knowledge of the tides in the area. This was their hometown. This was like a home game. The battle started out mostly as a long distance affair because, you know, it's boats. So they were just shooting arrows at each other, but eventually they started boarding each other and fighting with swords and like daggers and stuff. And it became like a real bloodbath. The Taira actually did have a massive advantage at first because they knew the tides. They were able to surround the Minamoto forces and it was not looking good for them. But in true Taira fashion, this completely backfired on them. They lost the tide, and the Minamoto forces were able to quickly surround them. Yoshitsune saw that one of the Taira generals, Taguchi Shigeyoshi, was protecting this one ship rather fiercely, and this gave away to Yoshitsune that this is where they were keeping the little baby Emperor Antoku. In a bit of a f***ed up way, Yoshitsune decided to tell all of his men to focus their fire on that ship in particular. And sadly, The little baby boy emperor did pass away in this. I think he was like 6 years old. As soon as the Taira forces knew they had no chance at victory in this war, they started committing mass suicide. They would rather die than face defeat at the hands of their mortal enemies, the Minamotos. But I'm also certain that them losing their little emperor was a big hit to their morale. This final victory won by Yoshitsune left the Taira clan with little to no power at all over Japan, and they were completely insignificant after that for the most part, thus ending the Genpei War. After the war, Yoritomo, Yoshitsune's older half-brother that I don't like, we're getting into that soon, took complete control over Japan and became the first shogunate, or military leader. After the Genpei War, our puppet emperor Go Shirakawa, who was still allowed to be emperor, but only ceremonially and for cultural reasons, he appointed our war hero Yoshitsune as the governor of Iyo, which is a province on Shikoku. Yoshitsune accepted this title as it is a bangin' job, but for some reason, Yoritomo fiercely opposed this, and he overruled all of Go Shirakawa's titles that he gave to Yoshitsune. Yoshitsune was obviously pissed off by this douchebaggery, so he went to get support from his cool uncle, Yukie. Yukie obviously wanted to support his amazing war hero nephew, so they both banded together and tried to oppose Yoritomo in his somewhat cruel rulings. But this only made Yoritomo even more pissed. Yoritomo then sent out for his brother Yoshitsune's head, causing Yoshitsune to flee Kyoto, seeking sanctuary with his friend Fujiwara no Hidehara in Hiraizumi. Yoshitsune lived peacefully for a while with Fujiwara no Hidehara, and everything was going well until, unfortunately, Hidehara ended up passing away. Upon passing away, though, Hidehara asked his son, Yasuhida, to continue to look after Yoshitsune on his land. And Yasuhida accepted this. Eventually, though, Yasuhida, under the immense pressure of Yoritomo, ended up betraying Yoshitsune. He could not keep saying no to the ruler of Japan, the first shogunate of the Kamakura era. Yasuhida ended up surrounding Yoshitsune's Koromogawa no Tachi residence with his own soldiers. Though to get to Yoshitsune, they had to go through his retainers, including the brick shithouse Benkei, who was 6'2", which is extremely f***ing tall in Japan, especially for the old days. Since Benkei was literally one of the fiercest warriors out there, Yasuhida's men were obviously way too scared to confront him, and those that did met very swift ends. But Yasuhida realized one thing, and that was the fact that Benkei was not immune to being shot by arrows, so he shot Benkei with a bunch of arrows. Benkei actually died standing up, which is a crazy feat. That's one of the most famous deaths in samurai history, Benkei's famous standing death. And there are actually statues of that in Japan honoring it, because that is one of the coolest f***ing things I have ever heard in my life. Yasuhida's soldiers were actually too afraid to walk around Benkei because they weren't sure if he was actually dead yet or not. They eventually did. He was completely f***ing dead. There is no coming back from being an arrow pincushion. And Yoshitsune actually ended up committing seppuku in his Koromogawa no Tachi residence. Even more f***ed up, Yasuhida had Yoshitsune's head cut off and preserved in sake and sent back to Yoritomo in a black lacquered box to show him, like, hey, look what I did. I helped you out. Maybe you can give me some more favor. Since record keeping in that day and age was actually terrible, there are some rumors as to what actually happened to Yoshitsune. People think that he didn't actually die and get his head cut off and preserved in sake and sent to his dickhead half-brother. One of the more popular legends is that Yoshitsune escaped to the island of Hokkaido and took on a new name. Because of this legend, the town of Biratori in Hokkaido has erected a statue of Yoshitsune as like a, hey, he came here, he lived here, the legend actually goes on. A little less realistically, there are rumors that Yoshitsune actually escaped Japan and went to mainland Asia, where he resurfaced as none other than Genghis Khan. You know, anything's possible. The timelines actually weirdly line up pretty well, but I personally don't think that happened. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. It's most likely that Yoshitsune did die and have his head preserved in sake. And this concludes the story of the Kamakura era's most famed samurai war hero, Minamoto no Yoshitsune. If you guys liked the video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy during these crazy times, and I will see you guys in the next video. Gokigen yo!